Greetings, all! Today, we will be examining the relatively rare Dark Dragon-type Pokemon Deino, the Irate Pokémon, its rare evolution Zweilous, the Hostile Pokémon, and its final, exceptionally rare evolution Hydreigon, the Brutal Pokémon. Vicious towards all by default, and a monstrous group of beasts to be sure, the members of the Deino family are brutish creatures that will gladly use all of the power at their disposal to make a meal out of anything they can get their mouths on.
Deino have short, stocky quadrupedal forms, with blue scales covering most of their form, standing and walking with 4 digiless flat-bottomed feet, further possessing a small tail. Their head and neck are covered in thick black hair with red speckles to form a horn-like crest in the back of their head, further covering their eyes completely and only leaving their large mouth exposed. Their evolved forms, Zweilous, have the same general body color and fur pattern, but possess a red ribbed scale markings on each side of the underbelly and 2 sharp white claws on each of their front feet. In addition, they have sprigs of black hair that jut out from the middle of their body and feature not one but 2 heads with a pair of crossed hair crests on each head, as well as a large pair of fangs on both of their lower jaws. The final evolution, Hydreigon, also retain the same scale and fur color pattern as their pre-evolved forms, but the tail has elongated noticeably, with scaly ribbed red scales on the underside, as well as a series of 6 ribbon-like black wings on their back, their back legs having degenerated into fleshy stumps with little use to them. Their neck and arms all have a head attached to them now, for a total of 3 heads, with the 3 of them having a collared plumage of red fur crests around their necks, though only the main head has functional eyes, deep red in color and sunken into their frame with black flesh rimming them in their eye sockets.
In relative terms, Deino go through an extremely long latency period before the genetic code mutates substantially enough to allow evolution.
Contrary to popular belief, however, this does not appear to be the result of genetic stability. Rather, it is because of extreme instability. Although it may be seem contradictory, the fact of the matter is that the genetic code of Deino fluctuates so much between cell and mitosis that no real changes can stay permanent for more than a few generations of cells before being changed again. As a result, these species are in a state of constant genetic flux. On the bright side, these changes are relatively minor and result in no major changes throughout these beasts' lifetime. However, when a specific set of mutations do occur and are present together at the same time, their genetic code will rearrange and evolution will occur. Unfortunately, since it is still technically unstable, their evolution to Zweilous is painful and relatively grotesque, resulting in an instantaneous fission and fusion of both body and mind. In layman's terms, their bodies split into 2 separate beasts, but are recombined the next moment. The resultant monsters known as Zweilous are extremely hostile towards both other Pokémon and themselves, because they possess 2 separate brains. Since there is no psychic link present to keep the 2 heads in harmony, Zweilous constantly bicker and fight with themselves over the most trivial of things, which can cause serious problems if both heads cannot be given equal attention by the owners. The only benefit to this is that their constant internal fighting allows them to get stronger without needing to actually fight others to do so over time.
Zweilous, much like their pre-evolved form, are blind, so they must constantly bite and strike everything around them to get a feel for their surroundings. While 2 heads would normally provide the advantage of covering twice as much ground, in this case, the 2 heads' inability to coordinate movements with one another rarely results in an efficient survey.
In fact, the ability to utilize a double hit attack alongside their basic tackle attack is the only real advantage Zweilous have over their pre-evolved form in terms of its sheer technical ability. Perhaps not surprisingly then, Zweilous tend to live outside of caves, where 2 heads would only prove to be double trouble, and instead tend to congregate on the outskirts of large cities. Considering the ample concentration of food within and outside cities, this choice of habitat makes perfect sense. The genetic instability of their family literally comes to a head when Zweilous finally evolve. Like a butterfly emerging from a cocoon, the final mutation produces an entirely new creature and is marked by the addition of a 3rd head, which acts as the prime head of Hydreigon and possesses advanced extrasensory powers, in turn granting Hydreigon fairly extensive special offenses, as well as the ability to naturally learn the tri-attack move. Besides being incredibly frightening, this prime head also possesses the ability to actually see clearly, making Hydreigon far more of a threat than their pre-evolutions could ever be. The 2 former heads shrink and lose their brains altogether, which recombine outside the heads and become the single brain of the prime head, effectively becoming the hands of Hydreigon. Despite having no brain function though, the 2 shrunken heads can still be operated as heads in an oral fashion, and are still connected to the beast's stomachs, so Hydreigon can actually eat with all 3 of their heads in a rather gruesome manner. While Hydreigon do possess a sextet of frightening wings, they are not strong enough to actually maintain sustained flight. Hydreigon are only able to fly because of their advanced extrasensory powers, which allow them to heave their large bodies around in the air through electromagnetic repulsion, and thus gift them with the levitate ability in contrast to the hustle ability possessed by their pre-evolved forms because of their aggressive natures. As far as the stats are concerned, Hydreigon are powerful monsters that have a great deal of might to share with others in most of their base stats. the base HP defense and special defense stats being above average for a fully evolved Dark-type Pokemon, and the base special attack and speed stats being above average for a fully evolved Dark and Dragon-type Pokemon, further possessing the highest base special attack stat out of all non-legendary Dark-type Pokemon, and the highest base stat total out of all non-legendary Dark-type Pokemon, tied with Tyranitar, and non-legendary Dragon-type Pokemon, tied with Dragonite, Salamence, Garchomp, Goodra, Kommo-o, Dragapult, and Baxcalibur. So to say that these beasts are terrifying forces to face is an understatement. What makes Deino particularly dangerous to be around is the fact that they are completely blind, if only because the condition appears to be a recent adaptation to cave life, and is therefore something that the species as a whole has not adapted to completely. Because they lack any extrasensory powers, Deino must tackle and bite everything around them in order to get a sense for their surroundings. As such, their bodies, and those that they haven't warmed up to yet, are usually covered in both old and fresh wounds. Being blind has further deprived Deino the luxury of being able to see what little they can actually eat, so they eagerly bite and eat anything that they can get their mouths on. While the relatively strong stomach acids can digest even rotting meat, concentrated poisons will still make these creatures ill. Trainers should thus be especially careful when approaching these beasts, even if they belong to said trainer, as they will care very little about biting off a hunk of meat from anything if they are hungry. To say the least, Zweilous are greedy and ravenous. No matter what time of the day it may be, Zweilous are always hungry. This is also due to the mutated anatomy, as they essentially possess the stomachs of two Deino fused together into one large organ. The problem with this, however, is that both the heads on Zweilous are competitive. Each head will try and out-eat the other one, as long as they can find something edible within their reach, with the head that eats the most in any given meal being assigned as the temporary leader of the unnatural legion. Once they can no longer find any food within their territory, Zweilous will simply move on and start raiding a different area. Unfortunately, mutation has dulled the nerve connections between Zweilous and their stomachs. Combined with their competitive nature, this then makes Zweilous very prone to overgorging and gastrointestinal issues of severe magnitudes. Trainers that hope to tame these beasts will have to be extremely careful in planning their feeding regimens, especially if they do not want to end up as a meal themselves.
Unfortunately for trainers, what was once mere frustration and anger in Deino and Zweilous is turned into pure malice within Hydreigon.
Without any care for others, and little more than destruction on their mind, Hydreigon actively pursue and destroy anything and everything they wish to. While it is said in places like the Paldea region that these beasts act the way they do because of how they were loathed by others in ancient times as incarnations of evil and relentlessly attacked, the true reason behind this destructive attitude is that the adrenal glands of Hydreigon are connected too strongly with their visual receptors due to the rapid development of full eyesight in their anatomy. If anything moves within their sight, Hydreigon will become overstimulated, experiencing an immediate adrenaline response, and will act as if the object of life form in question is an enemy, destroying and consuming it in one fell swoop. While this might make them look unintelligent, the truth is quite the opposite. Since they technically possess the brains of two separate organisms, Hydreigon are extremely smart and are highly obedient towards skilled trainers. However, it should be noted that Hydreigon are still relatively rare to see in battle because of the tendency to attack anything, including opposing trainers and innocent bystanders. Among all Pokemon of their standard caliber, Hydreigon are considered to be the toughest to handle and are thus seen as a sign of true combat mastery.
No, and hell no! I can understand these creatures are quite powerful when fully grown up, but as far as I'm concerned, the members of this family are just way too dangerous for me to even think about going near them. Deino on their own are pretty weak and can't really even see them much at all, so they might not seem like a serious threat at first. However blind as they may be, they more than make up for this by being incredibly vicious and a huge pain in the rear to raise, especially given how long it takes them to evolve even once. Zweilous are at least a decent step up from their pre-evolved form and can make good use of some strong physical attacks to defend themselves with, but their attitude still makes them hard for most trainers to work with. The fact that their two heads can't usually get along all that well is shameful given that they need to work together to make the most of their power, so their internal bickering can make it hard for them to get a focus on any battle they are part of. Hydreigon are by far the worst of the bunch and will literally attack anything they can on sight in the wild, no matter if they have the power to handle it or not. This more than translates into their combat performance against any sort of opponent in battle. So if you want to be able to keep them in check and not rampaging wherever they please to, you will need plenty of restraint and a lot of training to at least partially tame these beasts, if you can manage that at all safely.
A terrible force to face without the power of fairy types at one's side, and vicious enough to make handling them all but impossible for novice trainers, the members of the Deino family are truly the most dangerous of pseudo-legendary Pokemon to handle, and not something worth taking lightly when fully developed. You may have to wait an extremely long time for them to reach the highest stage of maturity, but it can be more than worth it once you've seen them in action.
Just do yourself a favor and make sure to keep out of the direct line of sight when battling with them if you can help it, or the mere motion of you trying to command them might send them into a rampaging tizzy that can put opponent Pokemon, their trainers, and even yourself in the pathway of the ravenous and destructive instincts.
Thank you for watching this video. It brings me great joy to be able to speak to you all in the world each and every time we meet like this, to explore the many different facets of both the world of Pokemon as we know it, and the world as we live it, through every adventure we have with Pokemon by our side. If you'd like to, please subscribe, ring the bell and all that jazz, to keep yourself updated on content uploads and other materials of the like. You can also follow me on Twitter if you'd like to know right away when something new is uploaded, and my written works, from which most of this is based on, can be found on DeviantArt. Links to both can be found in the description down below. Remember that the world of Pokemon is a place full of wonder and mystery, and you never know what to expect. So, stay vigilant, keep watch, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Until next time, trainers and friends of all sorts, have a wonderful time.